Happy Friday, guys, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Dubs. I'm your host, Bill T. Another Friday, another great VW podcast that I have ready for you guys. And this podcast this week is pretty exciting. But before we get into this podcast, I wanted to make sure that you guys know how much I appreciate when you share this podcast. So if you go down the little link where you're listening to this podcast at, copy and paste it and send it out to all your friends and let them know Let's Talk Dubs is your favorite podcast that you listen to, bringing you all the up-to-date, innovative stuff going on with Volkswagens today. And on today's podcast is no different. But before we get into that, make sure you guys go subscribe to VW Trends Magazine, a magazine for the people, by the people. Not the same old stuff. Cool articles, water pumpers, how-tos, lots of good content. New issue just came out a couple weeks ago. So make sure you guys go subscribe at VWTrendsMagazine.com. That's VWTrendsMagazine.com. Also, don't forget to go support our fellows over at Ross Wolf. Supporters of the podcast, go pick out some cool stuff on their website. High performance aftermarket parts made by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. So make sure you guys go check them out at rosswolf.com. Also, a couple shout outs for this week. I want to give a shout out to Max Fischer from Bavaria Dorfen in Deutschland. So appreciate you for supporting the podcast. Sent him out some gear this week. That's right. We got listeners all around the world. Also, Michael Hartman out of West Virginia. Fairmont, West Virginia. Appreciate you supporting the podcast. So thanks so much for supporting the podcast. Another week down, another week closer to Let's Talk Dubs and the Wagons. One crazy weekend brought to you by Finley Volkswagen. That's going to be going on October 6th and 7th. Go to letstalkdubs.com for more information. Click on the Showtime link. All the room reservation information is there. Go book your rooms. They're almost done with the rooms. So I've had a couple people call. I had to make some phone calls. They opened up the block of rooms again. Make sure you book your rooms now. You do not want to miss this event. So it's going to be the craziest weekend you've ever had in Vegas. Strip cruise, poker run, car show, all the good stuff, and your chance to win $2,000 in cash money. So look forward to seeing you guys October 6th and 7th. We got a lot of pre-registration going, and it doesn't look like it's slowing down anytime soon. So this week's podcast, you may be familiar with, if you've ever checked out some of the electric stuff that's going on with Volkswagens online, you may have seen some of the things out there. The guy we have on the podcast today, Jehu Garcia, he's actually the brother of Gabriel Garcia, who does the keys. So Gabe's VW Keys. This is his brother, and his brother, Jehu's been doing a lot of big things with electrical conversions on his bus. He, a couple years ago, drove his bus to Buses by the Bridge, all electrical, see what he had to do to get it happening. He has the whole build process. He's a big DIYer on YouTube. He's got a big following, huge channel, and lots of cool stuff. He's your guy to go to if you need backup batteries and power sources and things to that extent. Cool guy. We talk about the bus build. We talk about a lot of stuff, talk about electric powered vehicles. We talk about so many different things connected to this. So it's a great podcast. I know you guys will enjoy the listen and maybe spark your interest, no pun intended, on doing some electric conversion stuff and just see kind of really the spirit of the DIY mentality and where that can take you. So I'm excited to get Jehu on here. If you guys haven't checked out his YouTube page, go check it out. It's Jehu Garcia. His website is Jag35. So good dude, VW guy from way back, and he's been on the front edge of doing a lot of the DIY electric conversion. So if you got any interest in that, this is going to be a good podcast that you're going to enjoy listening to. So without any further ado, guys, let's get into it this week. Jehu Garcia, Jag35, electric 23-window bus on Let's Talk Dubs.
You probably don't know that there's a new Volkswagen out that doesn't look like a Volkswagen. It's got everything that people who like the bug like. So if you happen to see a good-looking Volkswagen, don't panic.
Okay, everybody. So on today's podcast, if you've been on YouTube at all and you're in the bus scene and you're involved in knowing what's going on with a lot of the bus stuff, the electric car movement, electric car conversions and all that kind of stuff, you would definitely know our next guest. Our next guest is Jehu Garcia, and Jehu's got a website, jag35.com. You may know him because of his escapades in his VW bus. He had a VW bus he converted, drove it to to Buses by the Bridge a few years ago, and he's got a pretty strong YouTube following. But of course, like everything with our podcast, he's a hardcore VW guy, and I'm excited to get him on the podcast. So, Jehu, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
So the way we always start the podcast is, what's your VW story and how did you get into Volkswagens?
Well, okay, my story is, I gotta say, when I was about 8 years old, I think my brother Gabriel, like by the way, is also very, very well known in the VW scene. If you have a VW, you probably gotten keys from him,
Right?
because he's been doing keys for like 40 years now or something like that. He got into Volkswagens that early, right? Way back in the day. And so I remember, I wasn't really too much into the Beetles. He got a Beetle that he, was using and stuff. But then he got a bus. And that bus was like, whoa, for some reason, I'm like, okay, this is a different thing. This is a different car. And I kind of just grew up dreaming about one day owning one, right? Just kind of daydreaming. And then he went through a bunch of them and all that stuff. The only thing I remember was that I love the bus. I love the car. I just really didn't like the engine. I just, the whole maintenance, and it caught fire a couple of times.
Right.
And it was always breaking down. That whole thing was always, and so in my little, DIY mind, even way back in the day, I remember thinking like, man, if we could just put a modern engine into these old cars, like into a bus, it would be the greatest car in the world, right? And so that was the dream, but I never really got into it. Life kind of got in the way, and I got a lot of interests, and I went and did stuff. It wasn't really until I started my own business. I used to have a camera business, Jag 35. The 35 comes from the 35 millimeter adapters that we used to make. So it was a 35 millimeter little device that we used to make for video cameras. And so I didn't have a car because I kind of was tired of driving and stuff. And I got tired of having my employees drive me around like I'm a big shot, guy. And so I thought, I got to buy a car. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, who am I, And so then I thought, well, I'm not going to get a boring car. What's on the market? What's exciting? And at that time, the Teslas were, just announced. They weren't really selling yet. And so I thought, well, I want to buy one of those, and I could afford one of those, but I can't buy them because they're at least 18 months away or something before they even start shipping, And so I thought, well, if I can't buy one, I'm going to make one. And so then what I really decided was like, well, if I'm going to make one, I'm going to pick my favorite car in the world. And so I thought, well, it's a bus. And that's what I did. I told Gabriel, hey, I want to buy a bus. And we were actually looking at a bay window at first. But then he's like, no, you don't need a bay window. You need a split window. Let's find you one. And we did. We found a bay. It was a split window, 57. It was a panel bus that we found somewhere up in Oregon or something very far where he had to go and get it and stuff. And then, once I got it, then I thought, well, this is great, but I don't want a panel. I want a 23 window. And so then the idea then started, like, went down the rabbit holes. Like, well, if I'm going to, do this thing where I'm going to change it and it's going to be a modified, vehicle, a resto model, right? Which now it's known.
Right.
I thought, well, let's make it into a 23 window. And at that time, by the way, this is 10 years ago, 11 years ago, somehow. It wasn't as popular. Now it's like everybody's putting roofs and windows but back in the day, it was kind of a crazy idea, I think, and the idea is not mine. Gabriel actually did that in his original bus. This is way back in the day.
Yeah.
He actually bought a roof from my deluxe bus, and then he grafted it. My dad grafted it into his 13 window. And, my dad kind of didn't know how to weld and stuff. And so I thought, man, if my dad can do it, I can do it. So I just bought a little welder, and then it just went to town. And, I kind of recorded that whole thing. It's on YouTube, the whole, journey of making that bus from a panel into a 23 window. And then at the end of that whole ordeal, then I just threw some batteries in there, and then I put some electric motor, and I was driving the bus like that for a while. So that was the first one, that's how I got into that.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that, if anybody's watching your YouTube channel, they know that you're a big DIY guy. You like to do everything yourself, and that's kind of the resourcefulness that a lot of us in the VW hobby find ourselves in, right? We maybe can't afford something, so we're going to figure out how to do it ourselves. Now, your main channel really started with a lot of the, kind of starting to do it yourself solar stuff and a lot of DIY projects. What is it? What's the first thing you start realizing that you kind of have a knack for this DIY stuff that you're into, that you're able to really kind of, that really you're not scared to just jump into it?
Yeah, I think it's necessity is the mother of all invention, right? So it's like, like you said, I couldn't afford stuff. I didn't have money. I didn't grow up and, poor, like we didn't have anything coming up. And so it's either, if you want something, you either have to figure out, how to do it some yourself, and a version of it, and you always end up like doing something. And I started that really young. I mean, I had a DIY mind when I was a kid. I was taking stuff apart, trying to figure out how to work, how to do the thing. My dad was good at fixing TVs, and that's because, again, we couldn't afford them, right? So he just, people would give him like all broken down stuff, and then my dad would fix it up, and then next thing we know, we're like midnight there, and he just gets it working. We're excited because we got a TV, Yeah. My dad, I think I got that from my dad. We grew up in Tijuana, and we didn't have electricity growing up. This is like the 80s, and we didn't have running water or electricity, right? Which is weird because it's only like 200 miles from here, but somehow it's like 50 years ago. Yeah. Or more than 50 years ago. We were living like people were living, at the turn of the century here in LA, but it is just across the border. And so the thing is that my dad had to figure out how to like make his own, DIY his own, like generator. And then we were the only ones in that hill that had electricity. And people are like, what's going on there, And so my dad was very, he had a lot of ingenuity. He's also self-taught, the whole thing like that. And so I picked up right from him in the early days. And it just kind of has carried throughout my life. And so that is the reason why everything that I do is basically like, out of a dream. It's like, I can't afford it, but maybe I can come up with some version of that and say, figure it out. And including that was the whole thing. The first job that I was a carpenter for, a decade, 12 years or something like that. And, I was good at it, but that wasn't my passion. It wasn't the thing, I knew that I wasn't gonna, be well off doing the carpentry. They don't get paid well. My boss didn't want to join the union kind of thing. And so I thought for 10 years, I'm like, I got to figure out what else to do. And at that time, really my interests were, films. I wanted to be a filmmaker. I grew up in LA. And so I wanted to do films, and I didn't know how to do it, but here's my little camera. And so my first business was figuring out how to make, video that look like a home movie, more like the Hollywood stuff. And it was through a little device that was called a depth of field adapter. And that will give you depth of field with something that little video cameras lacked.
Right.
And, I figured out how to do that. Again, I learned in the internet. That was a thing that was very useful for me. I jumped in the internet from day one, where a lot of my peers didn't, right? And so then I learned how to make these little things, and then I share that openly in the internet. Yeah, I made these things, and just kind of overnight, people were like, "I need one," and so there's a little community that we're all trying to do that. We're trying to make our videos look more like movies, less like home videos, right? And so right away, within a couple of months, we mounted a little company, Jack 35, and we had employees, and we had, we were selling thousands of these little adapters, that we were making for about $30, and then we were selling them for like $300. So there's quite a bit of margins there, and so that was my introduction into kind of like, that was where I realized that you could make stuff, not just, like couple up some crappy looking thing, but you can make legit stuff. You can design. I got into designing 3D parts, and then ordering parts and coming in and assembling and stuff. And, then I became a maker. That's what it's known to be, makers, people that can just make stuff, You right. Dream it, you draw it, and then you make it happen kind of thing. And so it's very, very powerful. And so then the rest of your life is kind of that way. you're like, well, if I can't buy the thing, I got to make it. If it needs to exist, then, it's up to you kind of to make it happen. And so it's a different mindset, right? And so I've always had that, and that's how I approached the VW when I first got it. It's like, I wanted an electric car, I couldn't buy it, so I'm gonna make it. I wanted a 23 window, I couldn't afford it, I'm gonna make one.
So
and
now,
so that's how I did it.
So let's get into when you start doing do you first start messing with solar stuff, and then that evolves you down into the road of electric stuff? I mean, obviously everybody kind of wants to do that. I mean, how does it all come together from the electric car to the solar powered stuff to all that stuff, or which one comes first?
Well, no, the first thing is the electric car. I want an electric car, and that was the impetus to the whole thing, right? So what I realized when I was in that researching that part of the project, what became very evident was that batteries were really hard to get. Lithium battery was a new thing at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it still is. And it was almost impossible to buy them. Again, you would have to buy $50,000 worth of batteries in China, and you would have to wait 6 months for it to arrive. And, I didn't have $50,000. And I definitely wasn't going to trust some Chinese guy to put them in a boat and send them to me, right? So I thought, well, hell, there's no way that's out of my reach. I got to figure another way. And so what I started doing is looking at what Tesla was doing. And Tesla was using, which even at this point now, it's kind of like accepted, but at that point it was revolutionary. They were using 18650 cells, which are, I don't know if you know, do I have one here?
It's like a AA
it's
rechargeable,
this little,
right?
It's slightly bigger than a AA. It's in the middle of a AA and a D battery, right? And they were using thousands of these things to put in their cars. And, people were like, what the hell? You're making like a battery out of a tiny little... Those batteries were known, they were used primarily in laptops. Mm-hmm. And so what happened was that then they were essentially using laptop batteries to power a big car, and they proved... It was a crazy idea, and they proved that it could be done. And so once they did it, I'm like, well, hell, there's a lot of laptops in the US. I thought I need to figure out how to get my hands on, all the discarded laptop batteries, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be some good cells in there. And so that went that rabbit hole, figuring out batteries. And, that's the electrification thing of the car, of the VW bus. That's the easy part. It's finding a cheap source of batteries. That was the hard part. People were spending crazy amounts of money that I didn't have. And so that's why I kind of had to DIY and figure out some way. And so that's the reason why I'm into batteries today. That's how it went. The solar thing came later. The thing, it's just the battery was the thing that was hard. And I thought that's what I need to center, and I need to focus on that. And so that's how I
remember watching one of your videos where you would buy like pallet loads of laptop batteries, used laptop batteries. You would bid on pallets of them on eBay and then have them shipped to you. Then you'd go through the laborious process of like cracking them open, testing which ones are good, which ones are bad. And, it's interesting because when I saw you doing that, I thought to myself, man, that's pretty surprising. It's a little tiny battery, a little bit bigger than a AA battery, but they're all I guess they're all sequenced or parallel together. They're all sequenced.
Well, they're both. They're in series and then in parallel. So the parallel will give you the amperage, but the series will give you the voltage. And in order to move a 3,000-pound vehicle down the road, you need at least 100 volts. And then after that, you need some amperage, right? You need some, at least, a couple of 100 amp hours worth of battery.
Now, did you find that, how did you discover that they were using the little batteries? Because that may have been one of their secrets, right? Like everybody's like, how are they able to get these batteries? Because, I guess when you go to the drawing board, these engineers are thinking, how do we make one big lithium battery that holds this kind of charge and blah, blah, blah. And Tesla was like, let's just take a bunch of little batteries. We'll put them between series and parallel together. And I mean, it's obviously kind of an out of the box thinking technique. How did you discover that?
Well,
or when did you kind of cross that bridge and see that that's what they were doing? Or was it just common knowledge in the world of electric cars?
It was common knowledge, definitely in the, in the people that were interested in the cars, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people were like saying like, this is revolutionary because it's an electric car. for some reason we forgot that electric cars were like, there's more electric cars at the turn of the century than there were gas cars. But we forgot because, for 60, 70 years, gas engines kind of ruled the automotive world. But the thing is, so this is like in 2009 and 2010, I mean, the electric car was revolutionary. And so one of the things that Tesla was doing, they were openly admitting, they're like, oh yeah, we're using this new cells, this is lithium cells. This is like revolutionary. This is new. This is the future, and the 18650s, So it was known out there. If you dug more than just like surface level, you would see that this was the thing that they were promoting as the clever thing that they were doing, right? So I thought, oh, okay, like I know those batteries. Those are the cells that are in the laptops, So let me go and see if I could do that. In the end, it turned out to be too much work and stuff, but it would take a couple of years for us to figure that out.
Right.
And by that time, more sources of batteries were better and easier to take apart and easier to put together, kind of thing, surface. Very quickly, what ended up happening is that we got our hands on an early production version of Teslas. Mm-hmm. The Tesla was making cars for Daimler. And they were this little Smart for two cars. They're tiny little cars, 2-person cars. Yeah, so before they did batteries for themselves, they got a contract for BMW to make batteries for that little car. And so in 2008, there was like a full fleet of like about 2,000 of those cars that came out. So by 2011, 2012, those cars had served their purpose. And now the whole fleet was being decommissioned. And so someone that we knew got the contract to dismantle that, and then we got our hands on about 500 cars worth of batteries that were lightly used, essentially, right? Most of these cars have less than 5,000 miles on them. So they were Tesla batteries.
So now talking about that, right? So does Tesla have like a standard size battery and they put 12 of them in a car or whatever the case is? Or do they change the battery size based on the configuration of the car?
Yeah, those early batteries were different. They were long, and they were about 22 cells in parallel and about 15 cells in series. So they were about 3 kilowatt-hour modules, which were good, for about 6, 7, 8 miles, each one. So then you just pair two of them together, and that makes a 30S, which is about 126 volts nominal. And that's enough to make a decent sized car, a 3,000 pound car, go down the road, fast and with enough torque to be able to do it, right? So we got a lot of those, and it's crazy because I just went to the Peterson Museum, which they have a giant Tesla exhibition there, exhibit. And that pack that we got and we took apart, it's in there. It's a part of the history now. It's in the museum.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, look at that. I might still have one of those cases, and I definitely still have those packs are still driving my bus today. It's crazy, And secondhand batteries. So 10 years later, they're still going.
So when you're figuring how to power the bus, obviously there's some sort of scale where it's like weight times voltage, and then you get to some point where the more batteries you add, the more weight you add, so the more voltage you need. What is the bus without the batteries and with the batteries? How much do the batteries weigh that are in the bus?
The battery that I put on there, eventually I settled in, right? I was doing experiments throughout, many years.
Yeah.
But the one I settled in was for like, I don't know, let's say 14 modules of those Tesla modules. And then so it was about 48 kilowatt hours, something like that. And it was about 600 pounds. And that was good for, if you were going slow, like, 55 miles an hour, which by the way, it's buses like going slow.
Yeah.
You can get about 160 miles. That's the battery pack that I did that video where I went to buses by the bridge and I charged once on the way there, mm-hmm. and then I charged once on the way back. That's that battery pack, right? And so the more battery you start adding, then it becomes really trouble. And the buses in particular are really troublesome because they have tiny little wheels, they have like small, you don't have a lot of room. Like I like to lower my buses. You don't have a lot of room to have a beefy suspension. When you're adding all that weight, if you're adding 1,000 pounds of batteries into your bus, then there's not much room left to put passengers in it. And so you're riding, and then we're putting these tiny little wheels that can barely handle the weight. So there's a lot of issues that come with making them electric, right? But the happy medium was somewhere around there, about 50 kilowatt hours, about 600-700 pounds of batteries. And then you would be able to get about between 100 and 150 miles of range, right? If you were doing, because the thing is with these motors, they have a lot of torque and they go fast. My bus could probably do 100 miles an hour, right? Of course, it would feel like I'm gonna die because it's the most that body style does not want to go fast, and so if I'm doing 80 miles an hour down the freeway, I'd probably get about 100 miles. But if I'm doing 60 miles an hour, then I can get about 150. That's where it's at.
Now, you've had this bus. It's been done for how many years in its current state as far as being converted to electric? And then what's the motor setup in it, and how long has it been done?
So here's what happened. Like when I started looking into converting the car, what people were doing, they were using forklift motors. Forklifts have a DC motor, basically, a motor. It's a series wound DC. It's what it's called, and it's basically has electromagnets on the outside, and then a stator, and then the rotor has another set of magnets. So you connect those in series, and as you put electricity in there, they become magnetized, and so then you create the magnet with its own electricity that you're providing the motor, and then it would spin. But the problem with those motors is that they have this commutator, which is this thing that connects the rotating part to the static part. Yeah. And it requires brushes. And so, brushes, everything has brushes, all our little motors, like our early version of our drills, power tools and stuff.
Same brushes on a generator.
I mean, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, generators on the Volkswagens, right? So when you're talking about low power applications, something below 1,000 watts or whatever, those brushes are fine. They'll last you forever. They'll, how long does the brushes on the generators last? They last many years, right? But as soon as you get to 50 kilowatt, 60, 80, 90, 100 kilowatt, then those brushes are no longer able to kind of do their job, in an efficient way. So they get super hot. So you're always having to change them, and these are big, beefy brushes. And then there's a lot of the problems with that. Like as they're wearing down, all that dust goes all over the inside of the motor, and that's conductive stuff. And so now all of a sudden they start kind of shorting out the motors. You touch them and then you feel the voltage. And then because you have this motor connected to the transmission, and the transmission is grounded to the chassis, all of a sudden creates all kinds of issues. You're tingly when you touch the door of your car. So you're like, whoa, what the hell's going on there? So when I started doing my research, I was like, well, I don't want that. I don't, that sounds like a lot of trouble. You can get a ton of power. Like you literally could beat any car at a drag race with those. You could develop quite a bit of power, but they're not very reliable long term, right? And so I thought I need to see what Tesla's doing. And Tesla were doing this new thing that is called a AC induction motor, which doesn't have any brushes, right? The rotor, the part that rotates in that motor, it becomes magnetic, but because they induce current into it wirelessly. So it just, it creates a magnetic field on the outside, and then that magnetic field induces, and then it has a winding on the inside that gets electrified, and then, that becomes. So those motors have been used for over 100 years, and they're very reliable. They never fail. There's motors that are running continuously for 100 years. And so I thought, well, that's the way to do it. The clever part that they had just discovered around that time was the variable frequency drive, which is basically the ability to run those motors not just at a steady RPM, which is what all these motors 100 years were doing, right? They were just kind of running at a stable RPM, and then they were using a set of clutches and all this other stuff to be able to move. That's almost like a car. So the motor, your gas engine is just idling.
Yeah, the motor had 1 RPM, and then it was just control the massive amount of power through
Yeah.
brakes and stuff like that to throttle it back because
Clutches.
once it hit its static RPM, it wasn't going up or down. It was where it was.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that was the clever thing around that time when I was getting into this. They had what was called a variable frequency drive. It's a big giant set of transistors that can, they can drive the motor at 2 RPM or at 3 RPM or at 1800 RPM, which is like a little potentiometer that then you would put into your throttle, and then that would become your thing. And so that was revolutionary. That's what Tesla paid billions of dollars to get from a local company here, AC Propulsion, right? And so that was becoming a thing that was available because what they were doing is they were building, like just big, extra large size forklifts that had AC induction motors. And so then we took those big inverters and those motors, and then a company here locally, it was like within 5 miles of here.
Really?
They were, pioneering that technology. They started making high performance electric motors for golf carts, golf carts that would like be like some like regular cars,
right,
down the road. And so then they got to the point where they were making the motor system so big that they're like, hey, we can actually put these in regular cars, and so then that's what I ended up doing. I bought one of their kids, and that is crazily enough, it's in my bus right now. It's almost like very little maintenance.
And
like I said, there's like very little moving parts.
So with the DIY aspect, right? Like what was the cost to do all that originally with like using the forklift motors and all that stuff? And then when you finally pointed up to buy one of these, I guess it would be like a brushless motor, the AC inductive motor. Is that what they call brushless?
It's a brushless motor, but it's not a brushless DC motor. It's an AC induction motor. Now what's in Teslas today, it's more like a brushless DC motor, right? It's a little bit different. It's called you don't have to go into the weeds there, but right. It is essentially closer to a brushless DC motor. Back in the day, it was really expensive. I paid $5,000 for that system, right? And it was just the motor and the controller, and then everything else you have to get.
Now, was that the forklift motor, or that was the AC inductive motor?
No, that was the AC induction motor. Yeah, I skipped the whole DC motor stuff because it just wasn't. I thought it was too much trouble, right? And so definitely did not want to go that route. And so I just went to that. I paid $5,000 for the motor.
And $5,000 is the motor and the regulator, essentially like the ability to
the controller.
Throttle the power, right? So
yeah.
$5,000 for that motor, which is not a bad price at all. Figured you buy a VW motor, it's going to cost you, a good $10,000 for, like, if you're building a motor that's going to run with traffic today, reliable, all brand new, everything, it's going to be $10,000-$15,000 easy all day long. So it's not a terrible price to pay. And then you've got the batteries. So by the time you were done, finally got it on the road and did all that, what do you estimate your total cost was?
Well, so see, the thing is, you got to remember that this is like 10 years ago, right?
Sure.
So $5,000 was a bit more than motors.
Yeah.
Unless you were getting some high performance stuff, right? The problem was the batteries. The batteries, you're talking about $20,000, $30,000 worth of batteries. And so, I didn't end up paying that because I really quickly became, kind of the voice for this stuff. And so as a result of that, I got, sponsored right away, right? Like the people who got the Tesla batteries, they're like, hey, like, we want to move a bunch of these and you're building a thing and you're experimenting with it. Here, have some. And then, but it's essentially, they gave me like $30,000, $40,000 worth of batteries. Yeah.
So they came to you.
I couldn't afford those batteries.
They saw what you were doing and thought, hey, let's partner up with this guy. Cause at this whole time, you go from doing the film thing to like, okay, I'm going to film my own stuff and I'm going to film my DIY stuff and I'm going to make it, watchable. Cause I've watched your content and it's watchable content. It's great stuff. I can only imagine what life would be like as a YouTuber when you watch someone that's got 450,000 views and you're watching a video trying to figure out like, what in the world are people watching, because that's a whole nother mystery. We'll discuss it in a little bit with respect to YouTube. But with the whole process that you've been kind of doing this trial and error, you've been really, there's a community that's been following you and watching you do this along the way. So it had to feel pretty good to get that recognition from somebody saying, hey, this guy's doing some stuff. Let's get him some batteries. And then that was a huge boost to you, right? To have you get those batteries and then start to bring some of that to the market, because it seems almost like there's a little bit of gatekeeping at the whole electric, electric conversion, solar power stuff. Like there's only those that do it and they control it. And then, I've watched you yourself do your own solar system on your house. You did your own Tesla wall type thing. You did all your own stuff. And it seems, and I don't know if it's more gatekeeping or people nowadays are just so lazy they don't want to do it. You know what I mean? But I look at it and I think like, did you find any of that stuff where like with getting the Panasonic batteries, right? Were they not sell them to you directly, or were they just out of affordability, or when you started building your own battery packs and stuff, what did you notice in that industry?
Well, yeah, I actually didn't see any of that, to tell you the truth. Like right away. So you said you had Michael Breen in this
right.
in the podcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the first ones I saw him at a VW show, and I was displaying my batteries, I had bought, I think I spent $11,000 for a tiny little battery that I put in the bus, and I hadn't even charged it. That's how excited I was about this. Let's take it to the show. Does it run? Not really, we don't know yet, but let's take it. So we took it to Classic, and I was there and I was displaying it and stuff, and he comes up and it's like, hey, this is great. Oh my God, we're doing some similar like that. We have a company, it's called EUS, and that's where I met him, and then that's where he sponsored me, because he was the one that got that contract to dismantle all those 500 Teslas. And so he was the one that sponsored and gave me a bunch of battery to test out and stuff. And we developed a relationship there where I was going down there, like, just to make content and stuff. Because that's the thing that I felt like I, kind of excelled at. I could figure out how to make content and stuff. And I like making videos, right? That was my thing. And so that's how that went. But I kind of don't feel like there's any gatekeeping in this industry, because he's super open about the thing, right? Like the thing that really is really hard is that it was very expensive. I mean, you were talking about $60,000, $80,000 to do a conversion, right? Because I coupled up stuff, with duct tape and wood and all that stuff. Bream he was more into like, no, let's do this right. Let's design these parts in 3D CAD software, and let's manufacture these things, and let's make it look pretty, the whole thing. So, by the time, we're living in California, it's the most expensive state in the U.S., second most expensive state in the U.S. And so what happened was that, it's only for rich people, to tell you the truth. That is the problem. It's not that there's gatekeeping. It's just the cost of it. Right. I definitely couldn't have afforded to be able to do this unless I kind of DIY the whole thing, right? And so that's what you have to be. You have to DIY it, or you just have to fork up, $60,000, $80,000. There's another one of these companies, Selectric, that has been doing this the legit way and stuff. And, they go to the shows. They were going to the VW shows for a while, and people were just, they were aghast at the fact that they were trying to charge like $130,000, $150,000 for like a fully restored bus with all the Tesla batteries and the electric motor, right? And they were like, what in the world? Why? They don't realize it's like, it's $80,000 worth of electric stuff, plus, restoring a bus is not cheap. You're talking about another $80,000, right? It's actually quite inexpensive. They're only asking for $150,000. And so the problem they were running is that people were having trouble seeing all that work. People think that, you just put a motor. How hard is it to take out a motor and put a motor? When you're doing that electric, it's like, no, you're engineering a brand new electric car. It usually takes, a team of 300 engineers to do the powertrain on a new thing. Now you're having to do that all yourself, and usually you're not, like a professional engineer. It's quite a bit of time. It's hundreds and hundreds of hours. That's what I ended up doing, putting in that original bus. And I even forget that because it's been so long ago, right? And so, and I was having fun the entire time, but once you go and look back, you're like, it took me months of like almost every day working, 5 hours in this thing. It was quite an investment, so it didn't cost me so much in money, but it cost me in time, which is money. So it did cost me in money. And so I think that's why it feels like there's gatekeeping.
Yeah. And I watched you did a series of videos where you started doing some solar for your house. And, I know here we live in Las Vegas, which is like the perfect place for solar power, right? What have you found with doing the whole electric thing? Obviously there's some sort of, I don't know if it's degradation they call it, or half-life, or whatever they term, where over time the duty cycle gets shorter and shorter. I mean, is that something you're dealing with like solar panels and the batteries and stuff like that? Or have you found them to be fairly reliable and of decent condition? I mean, what's been, obviously the hope for you in the beginning was like, man, this is going to be great, super cheap to do it. It's going to, not cheap cost, but like once I get it done, I won't be, my power bill is going to be super low and I won't spend money for gas and all this stuff. Have you found that the products available in the market are as advertised reliable, or is there a little bit of kind of buyer beware stuff, or what?
No, for the most part, I center really on batteries. I did do that solar install, right? But I'm not really an expert in solar. I use some kind of off-brand kind of a weird panels that they were like flexible and stuff. They were, by the time that I got them, they were kind of obsolete. They were out of production kind of thing. So that's my only knowledge or personal experience when it comes to solar, right? There's a lot more people that are way more experienced with solar. They speak better about the lifespan of the solar stuff. But I think generally speaking, they last just as they're advertised. People, they're taking solar panels. They're decommissioning solar panels right now that are 20, 25 years old. And they still work, they're just, the amount of power they produce is no longer viable, for the amount of space that they take, I think, and that's why they're being taken out. But, in the DIY circles, you're still reusing some of this. There's people that are buying secondhand solar panels. That's a thing that exists, right? Yeah. When it comes to batteries are actually way better than people seem to think. There's a lot of misconception that surrounds the lithium battery world, right? We think that because, this is the battery that we live, each one of us has lived with this for 10 years. Mm-hmm. We have a set of batteries that we live, right? We have about 10, usually they average about 10 lithium batteries in our life, and it's, the headphones that we have, the iPhone, our computers, our iPads and that stuff, those are all lithium batteries, right? And so usually I think in the early days, and even today, I think, the batteries here in our phones only last about 4 years. And after that, they're kind of trash. They only last about 50% of the time or something like that. And that is true. But we think that is because of the battery, but that's not really the batteries. These same battery, you put this in a car, it will last 10 plus years. The problem with this is that we're trying to cram the biggest battery in the smallest amount of space, and we're trying to squeeze every single ounce of energy out of it, right? We're supercharging it to the point where it's getting degraded at the very top, and then we're over discharging it all the way to the bottom at the end of the day, where it's causing more degradation. So that's why they only last about 2 years, and after that it's just it tapers down. But if you stay in the middle, like on the 80% in the middle there, oh my God, you can get, a million miles out of these. If you were to take about 5,000-6,000 of these phones and take the battery out and put it in a car, in a bus, you would get 15 years life. You would cycle it almost every day. And that is what we're realizing with the Teslas, because essentially this battery that's in here, it's like an 18650 that's in a Tesla, right? And Teslas have 7,000 of them. And so it's essentially the same thing. The chemistries have changed a tiny bit throughout the years, but they have increased very little, about 50%, I think, in the last 10 years or something like that. It's not a whole lot. It's like we're still waiting for that next generation of batteries that is supposed to change the world. It's not here. I don't think, and we're kind of far away. I mean, we hear all these headlines and stuff, but they're all basically trash. There's just a bunch of speculation, it's just a bunch of vaporware thing that comes up. Batteries they are what they are, and they're very good. It's just how we use them. If we abuse them, like we are in the iPhones, they only last about 2 years. But if we use them in a different way, then they'll last us for 10 years. There's the old technology was lithium iron phosphate. That's when I started originally 10 years ago. And now, because the lithium cobalt oxide chemistries were so much denser and smaller and lighter, right? Then the lithium cobalt oxide, the lithium iron phosphate kind of went away for a little bit, but now there's a resurgence. And the reason is because lithium iron phosphate doesn't use cobalt, which is the really problematic element of batteries. That's the one where like little kids are used, to mine it and stuff. And so those batteries don't have that. And so there are now, and the energy density, it's getting quite better in the last few years. They made quite improvements in that chemistry. And so even Tesla's using them in their lower end cars. They're still not as energy dense as lithium cobalt oxide, right? But they're good enough for the lower tier cars to be able to have it. And those batteries will definitely last 1 million miles.
Really?
Yes, because you can literally get 6,000 cycles on those batteries. When you use them full state of charge. Full like depth cycles. If you use them 80%, like you can in the cars, most of us drive 40 miles a day, right? So when you get a car that you have 200 miles, like you just charge it every day, or charge it every time it gets low. In my case, I charge once every 2 weeks.
Now,
because I don't drive that much.
Now, how do they calculate the charge cost? Like, what does it cost you kilowatt time to charge your bus if it's fully empty, and how long does it take?
So my battery, it's all, there's so many variables, right? I think our electricity here in California is one of the most expensive. Mm-hmm. And so we paid up to 55 cents during the day. Like right now, all these lights, that's what it's costing me, right? 55 cents a kilowatt hour. But as soon as it gets dark, everybody goes to sleep, then they change the rate. And now it's like 17 cents, 18 cents a kilowatt hour, right? So it's less than half. And so if you charge the electric cars at night, you're paying about 20 cents a kilowatt hour. And so my bus has a 48 kilowatt hour, right? So 48 times 20 cents. Well, you're talking about $9.60 to charge it, and I get about 150 miles off of it.
That's
now. My modern car has way bigger battery. I have a Rivian truck, and that has about 130 kilowatt hours. And so that one gives me 300 miles with that. And it costs me, times 20, about $26 to charge every night.
To go
so every 300 miles costs me.
That's not too bad. Now, since you've started getting into this, and this has evolved from like a DIY hobby into like a fairly successful YouTube channel. You know what I mean? You're not a small time YouTube guy. You've got a good following. You get a lot of videos, a lot of followers. And then the YouTube channel popularity that evolved into the business of selling the batteries and that type of stuff. How does that transition take place?
Yeah. So I was having really like a lot of fun making the videos. I really enjoyed it. And I was trying to get into storytelling and, the whole thing, and really enjoy that. The problem was that I wasn't making any money. And so after a few years of just being broke, actually a whole lifetime of being broke, right? I thought, well, this is not sustainable. It's not gonna be able to, I'm not gonna be able to keep going, right? So I knew that I was good at selling stuff, because I knew that the early Jag 35 years where I was selling the photography or the videography equipment were very successful. The only problem there is that I didn't know how to manage a big team of employees. We had like 20 employees and I'm just a terrible manager, and I never hired a manager. So it's that. And then the other thing is that I learned during those years is that I was in a bubble market, and I didn't know what bubble markets were, and I didn't know I was in one, right? And so I thought, oh my God, it's like we're making money right now. This is going to keep going on forever. Not knowing that the thing that I was making was, technology advanced so quickly. What's hot right now, it's obsolete tomorrow.
Right.
And so that's what ended up happening, and so I learned very valuable lessons there in those early years. And so once I was making the videos and I was enjoying it, but I wasn't making money, I thought, well, I need to really, go back and figure out how to make some money, how to sell product, because I know how to do that. I've done it once before. I know I could do it again. And so that's why I'm decided to then kind of refocus my efforts into buying and reselling, discarded, unused or overstock or, obsolete battery loads that are in the US, And it's kind of a novel cause, because if I don't do this, then what ends up happening is these batteries either go to the landfill or they get destroyed before their usefulness is over, right? So it's wasteful. Or they get put in a ship and they get shipped to China. And then China takes them and opens them up and sorts them out, repackages them, reships them right back to us, and we buy them again, right? So all this wealth is being transferred over to China. We're sending them our trash, which is worth trillions of dollars, right? And they're sending it right back to us, and maybe sometimes many trips going around, And so it's terrible. I mean, it's really bad for the planet to do that, right? Because we're wasting all this fuel, we're wasting all this, making all these carbon emissions, by destroying them early or sending them halfway around the world a couple of times, and then doing that, right? And we're just making them, richer while we're getting poorer, kind of thing. So I'm like, we got to stop that, and there's so much battery here, and there's so much trash, and people don't know what to do with it. I know what to do with batteries. And eventually that's what ended up happening. I stopped having to go look for batteries. People would see my videos and go, hey, we have a warehouse full of batteries. You want them? And then I would go and look at them and be like, yes, I'll buy the whole truckload, the whole warehouse. And then I would find applications for those batteries.
Now, who's the typical customer that you sell to? Like, who's your typical demographic that you sell to through your website? Because I see you have like power walls and a bunch of different battery configurations. Is it a lot of DIYers that you sell to on the battery stuff?
Yeah, mostly. So the thing is, like, having learned my lesson from the first business, then I realized that I wanted to stay lean. Right, I don't want to have 100 people employed, and I don't want to have a giant corporation that takes a long time to get going and it takes a long time to stop, kind of thing. Right, I want to be light and efficient, and so that is, none of the products that I sell are finished products. They're not, they're not like you plug and play kind of thing.
Sure,
they're all require some kind of, work to be done by the end user, by the customer. And so essentially I'm catering to the DIY market, which is what I am. I'm a DIY, and I'm like, well, I can't be the only one. There's a lot of people, Back in the day, we used to make a lot of things here in the United States, right? This is in the 50s, when the world effort kind of started. We were good at making stuff. But, through the years and through decades, we've been sending all this stuff out of this country and sending it to other parts of the world. So we've become really bad at making things. We don't know how to do anything. And so, but there's a resurgence of that, I think I'm part of that community that is becoming a thing. It's called makers, the maker fairs and maker spaces and all sorts of stuff. And so I really enjoy teaching people, empowering people into letting them know that they can make stuff, they need something you can learn. I actually don't have any certification. I'm not classically trained or educated in any form. The most I am, I'm now a retired carpenter. Right. So I have no business doing a car, and by the way, there's a lot of naysayers when I was doing this. I mean, people were like, you can't build a car, like you need to go to school and you need to learn engineering. You need to do all this stuff. It's like all the hurdles that people put themselves. Right. And I'm like, I know I choose to ignore all that, and I'm just going to go for it and try it. And then here I'm on the other side, I'm driving my bus for 10 years, but almost every step of the way, that I'm doing it, there's people who are like, you're not doing it correctly. how are you starting a business without first going into business class and getting a loan and all this other stuff? I'm like, watch me.
Yeah.
Hold my beer.
I think that's one of the things that spurred me to reach out to you again. We've been trying to connect for a little bit. I was watching a thread where someone started, where you posted, where someone started, more naysayers. And I thought, especially in the world that you're in, right? Electronics, DIY electronics. A lot of those guys are like retired engineers, people like that. And they've been conditioned to believe that you can only get an education through school, and it has to be taught through this education service, versus like, you look at every doctor, there's no doctor comes out of medical school and goes right to performing. He goes into residency for years, so he gets the hands-on experience that you can't get in the books, right? So you've learned a lot of this through trial and error, and I think that's huge. And when you do things like this, this is the American resurgence, right? Like people that are just determined to do things on their own, things that may seem unaffordable, and do them by themselves. Now, one question I had about your website, do you sell the components? Like if somebody wanted to do their own EV conversion, would you sell enough stuff where they could do it, or you could help them get some of the expensive stuff done for a lot cheaper? Or, is that something you've ever looked at? I mean, I know you have a relationship with EV West, but and they sell all new components, but what if there's another Jehu out there, right? That's just trying to do what you did.
There's quite a them. So, getting the batteries that need to go into an EV, they're top of the line.
Right.
Right. They're like the best batteries that we can get. Those batteries, once they come off of those cars, now they're useful for every other application out there. But only premium batteries, the most energy dense, the most, the newest, the lightest, the ones that can put out the most power, those are the only ones that can go in a car, right? Anything else doesn't make sense, because then again, the weight issue, the size issue, you have a lot of constraints. And so for that reason, I haven't traditionally come up with a lot of those batteries. So what I concentrated a lot more was in storage. Storage is another thing that is huge. There's a whole revolution happening right now. Like just this week, a whole town in Hawaii has completely burned to the ground.
Yeah.
It's something like unprecedented in the history. Over 1,000 people are going to come out dead at this thing. There's 1,000 people missing. And it all started because we have overhead cables, right? Mm-hmm. Which is crazy, because this is like 100-year-old technology. Like this is how people used to transfer electricity 100 years ago, right? And now it's becoming apparent that it's very dangerous to be using outdated technology like overhead cables. You could bury those. And even better than that, you don't even have to have cables. You can have decentralized grids, which is basically what you do is you put a battery in your garage, you put solar panels on your roof, you charge them during the day, and then you're using them at night, or during the day, whatever. Like there's plenty of power, more than our needs are just in the size of your typical roof. And so what we need to be doing is doing that. We need to, instead of having this centralized grid system that is failing, because we absolutely in the United States don't want to invest money in infrastructure, right? Now what we need to be doing is just becoming, microgrids, putting these little batteries and these little solar. So that's what I've been kind of centering, right? Because these batteries that I'm getting are kind of, they're overstocked, they're secondhand, and so they're perfect for that. They're not quite at the level that you would need to do the electric cars, but they're more suited for that. And so that's what we have been doing. And so that's the reason why I don't have a full kit in our website where you can just convert the car, which is quite problematic at times, right? I just came off of being on a TV show with Robert Downey Jr. where I show them, I converted a car for them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I have no product to push all these people. I'm going to get all these waves of emails. People, hey, in fact, I am starting to get them. I have this car, can I convert it? What do you recommend? And I usually be like, well, talk to EV West. They have the motors, they have the batteries, they have all this thing. And they are also doing secondhand batteries. I think they're starting to shift a little bit more, but for the last 5-6 years, predominantly with the batteries that we've been using for electrification or conversions is the Tesla Model S batteries, because they're the best. They're like, they're standardized already. Everybody knows how to do it. Yeah.
They're designed
and so
for that
that's how
Yeah.
And they're easy to manage them. The other cars, I do have some batteries that are here that I'm starting to get, but usually they're like from hybrids and stuff, and those don't have the same energy density as you would need, because those operate slightly different, and so they need more power than the energy. So their power cells more so than energy cells. So that means they could put a lot of power at one, at a given time.
One shot.
But they can't hold a lot of energy. Yeah.
Now,
right. And so those are the ones that are coming to me right now. But again, they're not quite the best ones to make electric cars.
Now, for those that might not know, talk to me a little bit about the TV show that you were just in with Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, Robert Downey Jr., after coming off of that super successful role where he plays
Iron Man.
Iron Man, right? He basically starts thinking about this, that, because he's got this collection of cars, like everyone successful in California or in the United States. You start amassing cars, right? I mean, we're a car culture here, right? But then he starts having second thoughts. He's going like, how am I, doing this with, this polluting, these giant cars, guzzlers, So he goes, is there a way that we can make them better, modernize them and stuff? And so he starts thinking about that, and he decides to make a TV show out of it. And so he wants to convert some of these existing cars.
Mm-hmm.
And then among those cars, he decides that he has always wanted to do the iconic VW bus. And he thought, well, I don't have one, but I want to buy one and I want to convert it. And then, and so he thought, he doesn't know how to do this. And the team of people that he hired, they don't know how to do it, but they're like, well, we can put you in contact with someone that knows how to do it. So these people, as they're doing their research, they come across my videos on YouTube and they go, oh, well, here's the guy that's done it already. He knows how to do it. Let's come. And so they contacted me, and they got me on board to go over there and help them do a conversion. So we converted a Brazilian. I think it was like an 82, a 72. I don't know. I don't actually remember the year, because those are kind of weird.
They're hard to tell. Yeah.
They're hard to tell. Yeah. It's a hodgepodge of all kinds of designs. And so they got this Brazilian bus, and I went to New York and I converted that bus for them. And then they completely ended up taking the whole thing apart and redoing it, because it was in such terrible shape. Like, they literally replaced every single panel in that bus. So what started as a Brazilian ended up kind of like more like the specs turned out to be more like a German one, because they used all the panels from funky green metal, right? From Gerson and stuff, right? And so, if the specs change a little bit from the Brazilian to this one, it ended up being more. It's probably going to be hard to tell that it's a Brazilian now.
So it's the Colombian,
all with new metal.
It's the Colombian Brazilian.
The Colombian special. Yeah.
I like it.
Essentially, that's what it ended up.
So what's the name of the TV show?
The name of the TV show is called Downey's Dream Cars, and it's on HBO. There's a whole season. There's 6 episodes. There's 6 cars. And there's another individual here that was in my podcast in the early days, Rich Rebuilds. He's really, really famous. He does, he fixes, Teslas and stuff.
Yeah, he's
like
in Connecticut somewhere, and he bought, I think I watched a few of his videos. He's a African-American guy, and he's in the Northeast, and bought like a total Tesla and had all kinds of issues just trying to hack the car and kind of rebuild it for himself. So
yeah. And he's also kind of doing that proponent like right to repair thing, right? Where he's trying to fix it, but Tesla's kind of doesn't like it, doesn't want to give in and let us, kind of fix the thing. And so then he kind of went into this journey of just showing how ridiculous Tesla is being, and making it hard for customers to actually build or fix their own Teslas, right? And so after that, he became a troll. He actually, the latest project that he did, he put an LS motor in a Tesla. So they ripped the batteries And they ripped the electric motors and they put an LS like 5 or LS whatever motor and they put on the thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, but there's so many levels of this. I mean, talking about celebrities and people that have, right. They say the EV1 is the most popular, right? The General Motors car. But even before then, in the Porsche Museum, they've got the Porsche electric horseless carriage that was there. And that thing won the first race of electric cars all through Germany. If you've been to the Porsche Museum and seen that was in the 1890s. And, they had a Corvair. They had an electric Corvair General Motors did back in the day. So with the experimenting with electrical has been around for quite a while, trying to get this thing unlocked. And it seems like, with Tesla really turning the corner with this thing, it's really opened up a lot of people's eyes to the possibility of that. And the great thing for us is a lot of the Porsches, Corvairs that I like, VWs, they're all probably the easiest cars to convert. But some of the other guys that have electric cars, I know Neil Young, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think Neil Young has like an electric Lincoln or something like that I was reading about years back. And I mean, that's a monster of a car already. So I can only imagine what it takes to push that thing. But it's funny because old technology is new again, with the electric and what it was harnessing the power, right? Being able to get that cyclical power that's going to last you a while. Now, touching back on the batteries and the things that you sell, right, for backup batteries and those types of applications, you did a power wall in your house and you did some solar stuff on there. What here in Las Vegas, I entertained the cost of doing solar, and it's funny, someone came and talked to me, and there was like a friend of the family was selling solar, and they were like, yeah, my house is 3,000 square feet, single story, and it's perfect exposure, big roof with a lot of exposure. They said, yeah, you need 50 panels, but Nevada only allows you to cover 90% of your consumption, which I thought was interesting. And then I remember my neighbor did solar on their house across the way, and I looked at it and I was like, gosh, those panels are not good looking. They don't go with the pink tile roof that they have, and it was really funky looking. And I remember one time the power was out, and I said, well, do you guys have any power? And they were like, well, no, we don't have any power. And I thought that was the weirdest thing, right? Like, how do you have solar on your house? There's a power outage, and you're just like the rest of us idiots, right? Like, I'm thinking there's got to be something there. Is there, is there an issue with the power companies not wanting to let people have their own power at their house where they can generate and use their own? I mean, I know it seems pretty weird over here. Like, you can't ever officially get off the grid here in Nevada. What's it like in California, and what are they doing over there with that?
It's the same thing. So you got to remember, like, these are utilities that should be public, but they're not, right? And this is the problem that we're running into because they're for-profit organizations now. And so that's the reason why they won't maintain their grids. And that's the reason why they're making the whole towns catch on fire and killing 1,000 people. But the thing that's going to happen is going to be crazy litigation, as it should happen. That the utility company in Hawaii, for example, needs to, foot the bill. Like, they need to be sued out of existence, because how is it that, they will get profits instead of safety, right? And so that's the reason why they won't let you go out of it, because they're in the business of making money. So they're not going to let you, go completely off grid. How are they going to make money off of you if you're not consuming electricity? So they will, they will lobby to put laws to put hurdles. It's crazy that like you said, the most common solar system, it's called grid tie. Mm-hmm. Right. And when it's grid tie, it essentially, the only thing it does is when the power is out, when the sun is out, you're generating power, but it's usually when you're not at home, when you're at work. And so what's happening is that all that energy is going to the grid. And so the utility companies are like, well, we don't need all that. Okay, we'll give you 2 cents per kilowatt. But then in the afternoon, when the sun goes down, then you come home and you turn your AC and your TV and your, all kinds of things. You plug in your electric car that you just bought, all of a sudden you're consuming crazy amounts of energy, and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, now it's like 22 cents a kilowatt hour, right? So they're not being fair, and I guess it kind of makes sense. Like they're in the business of selling you power, not buying power from you.
Right.
And so they're not going to want to pay you, the same amount. And so for a while, I think they were being forced to do that, but I think that all that stuff's going away. And, in California, it's such a crazy thing, with politicians not really being in tune and what's really happening. In California, we have so much solar that instead of being helpful, it is becoming, it's a problem. So
Really?
If you have solar in California, yeah, because what happens is that everyone during the hours of like 10 or 9 to 5, you're at work. And you're usually working in a building with a bunch of other people, right? So there's 100 or 200, 500 people, and they're using these massive AC units and these like crazy lighting systems that are very efficient, more efficient than if all those people were at home. And so they're not using as much energy as you're going to use in the evening when you go back home and everybody turns their own lights in their own. And so what's happening is that there's a surplus of energy. The state of California doesn't know what to do with the surplus energy during the sun hours. We're paying other states to take energy during the sun hours. There's so much of it. It's costing us money. I mean, I don't know if it's like a regular thing, but there's been times where we paid a ton of money to other neighboring states to take that energy because we don't know what to do with it. The way the grids work is if you're producing this energy, you got to use it. It's not like you can store it. But because it's costly, batteries are costly, they don't want to invest in infrastructure, and they don't want to invest in these new battery systems that Tesla's putting out. The mega packs and all stuff, they're like, there's going to be $1 billion to put grid, level batteries. They're like, oh, how about we just pay ourselves some, dividends or pay ourselves some bonuses at the end of the year instead of buying those, $1 billion battteries. And so that's what's happening. That's why you're part of the problem if you have solar panels. But the crazy thing here in California is that they're mandating all new construction to have solar panels instead of mandating batteries, which is the solution. Because imagine this: if you put a battery bank in your house, so during the day when you're not there, you're working, your panels are producing energy, but instead of you using it, it's just charging your batteries. Your batteries will take all that power, and then when you get home at night, you just the sun's down, it's no longer producing, but you have that energy stored in your batteries. Now you're using the energy from there. You're not having to depend on the failing grids that we have here in California and then a lot of other states because then that's what happens, right? It's like the grids are during the sun hours, they're up to they're stressed to the max. There's too much power. But then as soon as the sun goes down, then it's the opposite direction. Now the loads are crazy. They don't know how to generate that much electricity, because now they have to call neighboring states and be like, hey, can you turn on this, like standby? Having traditional power plants and standby costs crazy amounts of money. And by the way, you can't just we need extra electricity right now. Let me call this, extra plants that are on standby. Hey, kick them on. It usually takes 14 hours to get those things running. So that means they've been running all day, just in case they're needed.
Right. And
usually they're multi-year contracts. So we're paying for those things whether we need them or not. So it's crazy inefficient to have this system running the way that it is, where batteries are the solution here. You literally just put a battery, put it in your house. You don't even have to put a giant battery to support an entire neighborhood. You could just put one little battery in every garage, right? It could be, distributed like that. There's no reason to have this centralized thing where you have all these cables that run, for hundreds of miles everywhere and stuff that's the old thing. That's the old way of doing things.
And so what you were saying with respect to the battery, because my thought, most car guys go back to lead acid battery, right? You can only cycle it so many times, it's just done. With the technology with the lithium batteries is completely different. So with the amount of current that's drawn on a house, it's not the same as what's the demand put by an electric motor to move 3,000 pounds really fast at any variable speed at any split second. So because the current draw is long and steady, it makes the cycling on the batteries a little more tempered, and you're not like killing the batteries by doing that. So essentially, would you say that if you had a battery pack on your house, or let's say a guy want to take his shop, right? Let's talk about what the guys want to do, right? You want to take your shop you're going to build and make it completely off grid, especially a shop that's going to run a compressor, things like that. It's feasible that you could do that and run the whole thing off of a battery and be good to go, especially in a sunny climate like here in Vegas.
Yeah. I mean, you would need like as little as 20 kilowatt hour battery.
Now,
right. I just did a video where I showed how do you do one, like a DIY one out of like some batteries that we got, and they look really pretty, and I put them in the thing, and I think that's like $3,000 worth of battery or something like that, and it's 20 kilowatt hours. That will give you about 20 kilowatts. Well, actually, it will give you more than that. It'll give you like 7. It will give you about almost 100 kilowatt power, which is crazy. If you know that's enough to like run like a factory, right? Nobody needs that much in the shop. I mean, what do you got? Like if you got a compressor, you got a car lift, you got a thing like 20 kilowatt hours. That's about. I mean, that's the max that you would ever need. By the way, what's 20? Let's do the math here. Like most houses the modern ones have a 200 amp service panel, right? So that's times 2. What is it? 220. Yeah. So the 200 panel that is capable of giving you about 44 kilowatts.
Wow.
Right. So we're never using everything. Right. I mean, how often are you pulling 200 amps?
Right.
That's very rare, you know. So half of that, 20 kilowatts, you know, about $3,000 worth of battery, DIY battery, will be able to give you more than the 44 kilowatt that the grid can give you.
And now, are you allowed to put backup batteries in your house in California?
Well, there's a lot of red tape. That is that there's issues there, right? Again, because the utilities are lobbying hard to prevent people from going off the grid. Yeah, so you can do, you know, everything that's grid tied has to be permitted. It has to be, you know, has to pass inspection, the whole thing, right? And so you could do that, and you're allowed to put batteries at home, you know, that are grid tied and so stuff. Now, the way that a lot of us DIY people are getting away, or you know, getting away from or getting through that hurdle is anything that's off grid, you could do it. You basically there's no difference than you putting a car battery and an inverter and connecting your fridge there. You know, you can install it in the wall. You can run your existing wires as long as you disconnect from the grid power lines. Then you're good to go, right? And there are a lot of products that allow you to do that. There's these things that are called transfer switches, and they're made for backup. So when your power goes out, you know, people have this giant generators, and so you need a switch to disconnect your home wiring from the grid. And so now you have a plug in there that you plug your generator. Yeah, your generator. In this case, you don't need to plug a generator. You could just have a battery and an inverter, and then you can plug it in there, and it works the same way. Except just that less noisy and less pollution, you know, and you can get away a lot of cycles, less maintenance. You don't have to go and check your batteries. Lithium batteries don't need to be like watered and check the level, like none of that stuff. They kind of like you install them, you leave them, you never looked at them again. You know,
yeah,
kind of
I thought to myself as we were just having some work done on our pool at our house, and I thought, how come all of my pool equipment isn't solar powered? Like it would seem like if a guy made a solar powered pool equipment, like a kit, that would be hugely successful, right? Because no one's ever looking at their pool equipment. It's uglier than sin, and it's usually always out in direct sunlight. So you could actually build some sort of shade structure that would go over the pool equipment that would actually charge batteries that would power the pool equipment. You know, so yeah, there's a lot of.
I think the reason is because it's quite energy hungry, right? So you think about your pool pump, it probably pulls like 500 watts or 800 watts, I think. and you want to run that for how many hours a day, right?
Well, it depends on who you're asking.
Generally,
if you're asking me, it's 4 hours. My pool guy wants it to run 8 hours, but I cut it down to 4 because I'm not Daddy Warbucks over here. But now they've got variable speed pumps. So they're
definitely getting more efficient ones.
Yeah. So,
but even that, so let's say you get one that uses 500 watts, right? And you're going to run it for 4 hours, let's say, right? So you're talking about 2 kilowatt hours. Yeah, that's about $300 battery, $200 battery.
And that would
I usually sell batteries for about $100 a kilowatt hour.
And that would run it for how long? Indefinitely?
For 4 hours.
How many panels would it take? How many panels would it take to charge it?
Well, you typically in the summer you have long days with like 9 hours of sun out, right? But in the winter you have like maybe 2 hours or something, and it's cloudy or whatever. So I think in the national average is about 5.5 hours. So you would have to be able to charge that 2,000 or 2 kilowatt hour battery in roughly about 5.5 hours, right? So you basically divide 2,000 times 5.5, and you essentially need about 400 watts of solar. So about, one big solar panel or 4 of the little 12-volt solar panels.
And
about $400.
And that, if you're running your equipment 4 hours a day on your pool system, you could realistically have a self-sufficient pool pump system that doesn't draw anything from your house. It's just incredible that there's not more of that's allowed, and it seems like that the electrical company just still wants to get their piece no matter what. You know what I mean? So have you seen, since you've kind of gone down this road, have you ended up kind of taking a political position on this, or having to get involved to some degree, especially in your local community and stuff?
No, I tend to not rely on systems.
Right.
I'm DIY to the core. So yeah, I trust no government. I trust the governments are failing us. Look at what happened in Lahaina. I mean, just 1,000 people died. Not a single siren went on there. When they're looking at their documents now, they're looking at like, oh, what's the threat of fire? And it's like low. It's like, it's not even worth to fire up the sirens in their eyes. Yeah. Except, now there's 1,000 people dead probably, and over 1,000 buildings burned. It's just like, I have no faith in these systems, to a certain extent, right? But I'm like, don't wait for the grids to get better. Like take matters into your own hands. Like,
right.
Energy is very important. I don't know if you know this. Like, I think most people don't realize this. We're so dependent on electricity. Like, we know the second it goes out. We would know. I would know. The second, probably half a second after the power went out here, my lights would go off. And my internet would stop working.
Right.
And the AC would stop working. It's like, we're highly, highly, more than ever in history, we're depending on electricity, right? And we don't have a backup. Like, we're 100% relying that the grid is going to give us electricity. And a lot of the times it's worked, it's worked for 100 years. It's been pretty stable. But we're starting to see that all the systems are breaking down, especially in places here, like in California. Like here, PG&E got sued, right, by that little town that they burned to the ground, and they killed, 18 people or something like that, I think. They have to settle for $3 billion, right, lawsuit. And so, that was PG&E. That's in Northern California. But here in Southern California, it's Southern California Edison. Now, the Edison is going like, whoa, what do you mean we're liable for the debts that we caused? So now what's happening here, like if you're anywhere near the hills, if it gets a little windy, they're turning the power out. All of a sudden, this year we've had twice where there's more than 12 hours where we don't have power.
That's
and
insane.
I think a lot of those times is they just turn it off. They're so afraid that they're going to cause the next major fire that they're just like, turn it off. I know these people are paying us to provide service, but we can't safely provide it, so let's just turn it off. Which is really kind of weird, right? I mean, we're paying so much for this service, and like we can't we can't rely on it. Like, what the hell's going on? So we got to take this our energy use into our own hands. Here's what's going to happen: if we don't put our own batteries in our garages, pretty soon the utility companies are going to put their own battery in your garage, and now they're going to be benefiting from that,
right?
And they're going to make you pay for it, right? They're going to be like, oh, guess what? We just passed a law. Now every home is required to install this system, as a result, and it's going to be their battery, and they're going to use it. They're going to benefit from it, not you. Yeah. You're still going to have to pay all the money and stuff, right? So you gotta do it before they do it for you.
Man, it's unbelievable. There's so many layers to this, and I think what's neat is the DIY kind of against the system disposition that you have, repurposing stuff that would normally get shipped across overseas and then resold to us. I think it's huge what you're doing. I think it's awesome that you were able to kind of build a career out of a passion that you had to create, whether it's you're making things or creating content or both, which this happened to be both. And I think that's been, it's interesting how it all kind of evolved from just a guy wanting to do some stuff. And now you're on the forefront of doing things in a market where there's not a lot of people repurposing batteries that most people probably don't even know unless they start getting past the first layer. Most people don't even know how inexpensive it could be to start creating a backup battery system for your house, to maybe taking your pool equipment and taking that off the grid completely. Cause there's no reason with that. You just end the wires there at the terminal, cap it there and create your own pool pump system, to where you're not paying that, because that's always running at the hottest part of the day, where it's just, it's crazy how many layers this can go to. And especially with, the standpoint of automobiles and powering automobiles. One of my thoughts, because I know you've got that Rivian. I've watched your video with the Rivian. My personal assumption is, with the cars being so technologically advanced, there's a lot of knuckleheads that are getting these Teslas and, not paying attention while they're driving because the car's auto driving and all these types of things. My big concern is that the weight of so many of these cars, because they're so substantially heavier than the average vehicle, my concern is that when you do see accidents, they're going to be a lot more impact on those things because of the vehicle weight. Has there been anything that you've seen about that stuff that's been noticed? Because you're in the community, right, of electric cars and all that kind of stuff. Has there been any uptick in those types of things?
Well, there is. I think the Teslas are the safest cars in the world, but they're also kind of not. I think it cancels each other out, right? They have the most amazing traction control systems. Like, they're literally, like, it's faster than a gas car would ever be because there's no lag in the systems, right? But the problem is that they have so much power. And so, you could be an idiot. And I sometimes drive like an idiot. I have 850 horsepower in my Rivian, right? It should probably be legal to have so much power in a legal street car. Right. It's crazy amounts of power, like 0-63 seconds. Like, who needs that? Nobody needs that, and so it allows you to be reckless and just punch it and just go fast and try to show off and, stuff. So even though they are the safest cars in the world because of the technology they have in them, they're also probably about average because we're such idiots driving around so fast and they're heavier, so they don't stop as good. You know what I mean? Like, they go fast, they get going really quickly, but then trying to stop them, my Rivian has to have Brembo brakes. Like, these are high performance racing quality, like, brakes, right? Like, giant 14-inch, rotors with calipers and stuff. And this is just a backup because they really use the 4 motors that they have to stop. So, it's got crazy amounts of braking power. And the reason is because it's like 7,000 pounds. That's a really, really heavy truck. It comes like, there's some pros to that, right? Like, when you're towing a thing, you hardly even feel whatever you're towing.
Right.
It's so heavy. But yeah, if you ever crash, it's going to be bad. It's going to, you're going to cause a lot of damage. Maybe you're going to be okay, is you're just going to mow through, anything that you put in front of it. But yeah, you're going to definitely cause a lot of damage. And so, you know, the crazy thing about it is that if it was, I remember, 850 horsepower it's an insane amount of power. And the thing about it is that I at no point feel like I'm out of control, because this is the best car I've ever owned, like literally, right? Like, I remember just going to, in fact, when I was doing this TV show for Robert Downey Jr., they rented a car for me, and it was one of these rental companies that have like exotic cars, and they gave me like a GT Mustang, with like a lot of horsepower and stuff. And I remember like going like, oh my God, feels dangerous. Like having this much power in this kind of car, because there's so much lag. You step on the accelerator and it literally takes seconds for it to respond.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, I'm pressing. Oh, all of a sudden you're going. And then once you're going, it's just going. And you're like, oh my God, I got to think about stopping this thing. Where these electric cars are like mine, as soon as I let go of the accelerator, it literally starts stopping. So it feels very like you're in very control, and it's instant control. If you let go of that gas in a microsecond, the car reacts to that. It starts stopping in that microsecond, right? Where all the legacy stuff, it's like, it's kind of a wild thing. It's like riding a lion kind of thing.
Right.
You don't know what's going to do.
Well,
you think but
and I think that
you're not in
also
control.
It also comes down to power to weight ratio too, because the more electric cars, the heavier they are. They've got to have more power to make them feel like that they're not heavy, right? So, what with the other? How many electric powered? Do you have more than one electric powered bus, or you have one gasoline powered, one electric powered? How many Volkswagens do you have?
So I currently have 5 buses. I think 5 buses in different stages. I only have one that's running, and even that one I need to change the battery because I kind of neglected it. This last winter was really cold and rainy in California for some reason. Like, it never rains in California. For some reason we had 2 weeks straight where it was raining and it was kind of cold. So I have the Rivian, and I have a Tesla. I have modern cars. And so I just kind of like the bus was my daily. Like, I literally for the past 10 years I've been daily driving a bus. It's not the same 57. I wanted to restore it, so I kind of took all the battery and the motor out and put it in another one. And then that was my daily. And then I thought, well, I'll fix the 57. Now that hasn't happened for some reason. Restoring a car is so costly, and it's so hard to get anyone to do it, that I just haven't been able to find. I've been centering and other stuff. My dream is to actually mount a fleet of about 10 buses. And I want them to be like the bus that I want to drive, basically lowered, with airbags, one single gear. Like, I don't want people to, have to know how to shift gears to be able to drive them. So they're going to be fully automatic. They're going to be able to go fast. They're going to be able to stop fast. Basically make like the modern version of a bus. And I want to make 10 of them. And my dream was to send them to Maui and rent them. Right? I don't know if that's going to happen now. I think, that Maui is going to take a long time, I think, to recuperate. I don't think it's going to be, it used to get 2.5 million visitors every year. I don't think that's going to be the thing for a while. I think it's going to take a couple of years or something. So I don't know how fast I'm going to be able to do this, but that's the dream. That's where I'm working towards off right now, to electrify a whole fleet of them and figure out all the mechanicals. I need to figure out power steering. I need to figure out power braking. I need to figure all this stuff because I want to be able to hand the key, or not even a key, basically hand the code or something, because why do we need a key? I guess we could use a key because it's a classic car, to anyone.
Yeah. Whether
they know how to drive, classic cars or not, and just be able to drive it like a modern car. And that's quite a bit of a challenge, It's not easier. It's easier said than done, definitely. And so that's what I'm working towards.
Now, the other question I have, since you've been messing with electric stuff so frequently with automotive, have you looked at any of those electric AC systems to put in a car? Because those don't run off of a pump or anything. They're all electric, right? Those air conditioning systems in those cars?
They're electric, yeah. I haven't. I know they do work. I know there's a company that we saw at the last VW show that we went to, where they're starting to make some kits for buses, right? Yeah, it's definitely possible. It probably wouldn't be very efficient. The buses are such a giant cabin,
Right.
and they have so many windows. So to try to cool that thing down on a hot day is literally going to take kilowatts and kilowatts of power to try to cool it down. You might get it to like it's, where it's reasonable, I guess, or I don't know. I think on my bus, I'm just gonna put safaris in all of them, and you just open up all the windows, and that's how I've been driving my bus here in California. Like it quite works actually. There's a few days out of the year where the air is so hot that you're like, I don't know what's worse, like just having all this heat trap in here, or opening them up and having all this hot air just blow through your face, But it's only a few days out of the year.
Yeah, I'm in Vegas, so that's called summer. But yes,
that's called summer.
So if people want to check you out, obviously they go to your website, Jag35, your YouTube channel, Jehu Garcia is the YouTube channel. What any places you're going to be at coming up, or any places, any of these things that you get together with some of these other guys that are doing DIY stuff or makers and stuff like that?
Yeah, I have one tomorrow, but I don't know when you're going to upload this, but tomorrow there's an open house in San Diego. That's where EV West is at, right? And Encinitas.
Yeah.
I think it's not Encinitas. It's called something else, where they're at. But there's going to be, it's the EV Learning Center. Mm-hmm. And it's a nonprofit organization where some of my friends, including Michael Bream, has put a lot of resources in there to try to teach the new generation on about electricity and electric converting cars and making DIY power walls and stuff like that. So they have an open house tomorrow where I'm going to go there, and I'm going to show. I'm actually donating a battery for them so they could make a power wall kind of thing with them. So that's the only thing that I have. I don't have any long term thing that's coming up. I used to do the. Holley, Holley, the carburetor company?
Yes.
They actually are getting quite invested in the electrification world. And so they have an event every year. It's called High Voltage.
Yeah.
And I think they just had it. We went the past 2 years, but we didn't go this year. We might go next year. If I have the fleet or a few of the buses ready by then, I might go and show them up. But I think I try to make some of the local Southern California shows here, like Octo and that sort of stuff, try to make it there. Especially if I have any of these buses ready, I'm definitely going to make more an effort to show up there and show them there.
Well, I definitely appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast, and definitely anybody that's out there looking to kind of get a little deeper into this stuff. I mean, Jehu's the guy. He's the one that's been doing it this whole time. I mean, you're one of the OGs that I know of that's been there. You, Michael Bream. I mean, Bream's been racing. I think he was racing a BMW, electric BMW, 10, 15 years ago, So, I mean, you guys been out there grinding at the EV car thing for a long time, man. So if anybody wants to check out some good content, go check out his Facebook, or his YouTube channel. Jehu Garcia, and his website at jag35.com. And anything else? What's your on Instagram? Your Jag35 or Jehu Garcia?
Jag35, almost on every other social media. I'm not in all the new TikTok. The kids are doing stuff. I'm just kind of the legacy guy. Yeah, I'm old.
That's what they call us now, right? Legacy guys. So.
Yeah, I'm a legacy guy. I don't do the new stuff. I'm past my prime now, so I don't quite understand how the TikToks and the stuff work like that.
Right,
Snapchats and all that stuff.
Well, look, Jehu, I appreciate you coming on the podcast, man, and thanks so much for everything that we got to discuss. And hopefully, listen, when you get your bus projects close to being done, man, let's have you back on and let's talk about some of those, and let's maybe talk some performance spec on some of those things in the upcoming episodes.
Yeah, those are going to be awesome. I think I want to put 2 motors in there of the ones that I have. It's not quite as as powerful as the Tesla ones, but yeah, definitely over 200 miles of range.
Oh wow!
And Hawaii is perfect because I don't know if you drive a bus or you drive a Beetle.
I've got a couple buses. So.
Oh, okay. So you know that they like the perfect speed is like 45. Like anything above
Right.
that, you're just like fighting the wind. It just sounds like a hurricane outside, you know. And so you're going long drives. It's just, you know, you bump out the radio. You try to do things right. But Hawaii has this 35 an hour limit throughout the island. So I thought, oh my God, it's perfect.
Yeah.
It's perfect to ship these. But I know the last time that I was there, I'm like, man, what I would give to rent a bus here, you know, to have my bus and just go explore the island in my bus.
It's it's perfect.
And so
perfect
I thought,
weather.
like, yeah. Maui's beautiful, right? And all the waterfalls and stuff, you know. And I'm like, this is the perfect place to have a fleet of buses. And you know, and if they're quiet and they're clean, you know, and they're fun, I want to say, you know, so that's the dream. I want to retire one day and just manage a thing over there. But yeah, as soon as I get them, definitely maybe we'll have a podcast inside of them, inside of one of the buses.
Well,
or some. If you ever make it out here to the DBW shows, do you ever come out here?
I do quite a bit. You've seen all my buses, I assure you that. So I'll send you a couple links on my buses, and I know that you've seen my stuff out there. I've been going to Octo and that stuff since probably 2003 is when my first bus debuted. Ooh. You know, so the Bull Run bus is my bus, and then I've got the Carbon Cab pickup, and then I also own the Beetle Barn limo bus now. So yeah, I've got a few of those. So, but yeah, for sure. We'll keep in touch, and hopefully I'll see you at the next Octo.
We will. Definitely.
You got it, brother. Well, I appreciate that. If you like that podcast, you can go check out Jehu down there. He's going to be at Michael Bream's place at EV West. Go meet him, or you'll catch up with him at Octo. Tell him you heard him on the podcast, and share this podcast with all your friends that you think may have some interest in this particular subject. We've got more podcasts stacked up for you guys. Doug Jurgers next week with Squeege's Customs out of Arizona. You might remember that bug that was on the cover of 1991 Hot VWs, where it was a raspberry and pink bug that splash graphics across the bottom. He's one of the top custom rod builders out of Arizona, constantly in the battle and running for the AMBR awards. So check him out next week on Let's Talk Dubs. And again, you want to support the podcast, pick up some merch at letstalkdubs.com. And don't forget to go get your room situated and get everything handled for one crazy weekend coming up October 6th and 7th. And until next week, guys, later.
You probably don't know that there's a new Volkswagen out that doesn't look like a Volkswagen. It's got everything that people who like the bug like.